2 weeks until training camp. How are we feeling? The confidence meter for the Orlando Magic on today's episode of Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is September 18th, 2024. My name is Philip Rossman-Reich. I'm the senior writer over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Of course, follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, we're going to go over the confidence meter. How confident you should be about the roster. How confident you should be about the coaches in the front office. And how confident you should be that the Magic hit their mark and win a title before 2030. We'll get to all that coming up here in just a moment. First, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. No matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload, we truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. Remember, there's a great Locked On podcast covering every single team in the NBA. Just search for Locked On and the team you're looking for, the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Magic is sponsored by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So, we are getting closer and closer to the start of the NBA season. We'll get back to player outlooks a little bit later on in the week, but I wanted to do a little project. I did a project over the last week or so asking Magic fans how confident they are in this team. Please provide your thoughts as we go through this experiment here in the comments below, on my Twitter account, wherever you can. I'm curious how you're feeling heading into the season, because I know how I'm feeling. And I'm honestly a little bit mixed. I am maybe been through this enough to prepare a little bit for the worst. I am confident this team is on the right track. One way or another, this team is heading in the right direction, and this season's going to continue to add to that direction, no matter how it turns out. I think a step back is expected, and I'm hoping to have a guest talk a little bit about that and what to maybe expect after that breakthrough season. But the Magic, I'll say this, are a better team today than they were last year. They're a better team today than they were on May 5th when the season ended, last season in Cleveland. This is a solid team, and I am really excited to see how this team comes together. We've talked a lot about it this week. The Magic starting lineup is really solid. Like, this is a really solid starting lineup. I know people have questions about the ball handling and the playmaking aspect, and people have questions maybe about how it's all going to work. But if we just take that baseline assumption that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is just a better version of Gary Harris, this is going to be a really good starting lineup. The Magic's starting lineup last year of Jalen Suggs, Gary Harris, Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, and Wendell Carter had a net rating of plus 12.5 points per 100 possessions. It's a 114.7 offensive rating and a 102.1 defensive rating. The offensive rating, about middle of the pack NBA. It's outside the bottom 10, but nothing to write home about. The defensive rating, ridiculously good. And KCP is arguably a better shooter and a better defender than Gary Harris. Among lineups that played at least 300 minutes last year, the exact number that group played together last year, the Magic starting lineup ranked third in the league. If there is one thing that maybe the Magic didn't have to touch up a lot from last year, it's the starting lineup. And again, arguably, they made it better. We could talk about whether the Magic have gotten themselves into the title group, and we will get to that in a minute. We could talk about whether the Magic did enough to assure themselves of doing what they did last year and doing more. But they added a player who's going to make that starting group better. Now, the concern for me, the worry where my confidence wavers a little bit, is with the bench group. The Orlando Magic last year were fourth in the league in bench scoring. But bench scoring is notoriously fickle. Yes, the Indiana Pacers had the top scoring bench in each of the last 2 seasons. But the Los Angeles Lakers, who finished 4th last year, ended up near the bottom of the league in bench scoring at the end of the season. In fact, the Los Angeles Lakers, I'm trying to pull my stats up here, if I could find it in my notes. The Los Angeles Lakers really fell apart as a bench. They were 28th in the league in bench scoring last year. Orlando's primary bench groups were solid. The group of Cole Anthony, Gary Harris, Franz Wagner, Jonathan Isaac, Mo Wagner, probably your starting bench group in a 9-man rotation next year, was a plus 21.1 net rating in 81 minutes. A 111.4 offensive rating, which is not good. That's worse than the Magic's overall average. And a 90.3 defensive rating, which is really good. The group of Cole Anthony, Gary Harris, Joe Ingles, Jonathan Isaac, Mo Wagner was a plus 4 net rating with a 105.8, 101.8 offensive defensive rating split. Even though the bench scored the 4th most points in the league, they didn't play that efficiently. They didn't play that great offensively. But Jonathan Isaac's such a terror defensively that it may not matter. The concern for the bench, though, is the same concern everyone has for the starting group. It's with the Magic's ability to play, make, and create. The Magic lost their 2 best playmakers and their 2 best passers from last year's team. The 2 guys they let go are the 2 guys that kind of have the skill the Magic need the most. Losing Markelle Fultz and Joe Ingles is going to have an impact on this team. I think that is undeniable. And it's going to impact this part of the team, the superpower that the Magic had with the 4th highest scoring bench in the league. Now, I think that we'll see Anthony Black step up into that role. I think he is a better playmaker than he showed last year, but he's also a rookie. And as we look at the roster, and as we look at this team, the greatest uncertainty that they face is that they are still so incredibly young. Last year, they were the 4th youngest roster in the league. This year, they are only the 6th youngest roster in the league. They're a little bit older, a little bit wiser, a little bit more experienced. But now you're dealing with the weight of expectation. You're still dealing with trying to get better and improve. And again, we'll repeat this throughout the course of the year. That is not a straight line. Paolo Banchero needs to reduce his turnovers, but he's still going to have some games where he is on the ball a lot and turning it over a lot. He's still probably going to average somewhere between 3 and 4 turnovers per game. And you got to live with some of those growing pains. You hope he gets better. I am confident he will be a better decision maker, but mistakes are going to happen with a 21, 22-year-old. That's just the nature of things. And that's going to be the biggest challenge for the Magic this year. The roster is virtually the same. No doubt about it. It's going to be a very similar vibe, a very similar feel for this team. But the roster's got to get a year older, and they got to have players fill in for what they are missing, for what they are having to replace. And there is a lot that they're going to have to replace. There is a lot that they have to change and a lot that they're going to have to figure out really on the fly once again. There should be a lot of confidence, though, in improvement. Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, Jalen Suggs are all the type of people, and the Magic wouldn't have drafted them if they weren't these type of people, but they are the type of people who aren't going to be satisfied with what they did last year. Nobody is resting on their laurels with a Game 7 loss in the first round. They're excited for what they did. They're intrigued. They're looking ahead to a bright future, but there's still so much work to do. And that's going to be the biggest challenge. We should be confident that they will get better. And we'll talk about beyond this season coming up in a minute. But there are a lot of questions that need answering. And how good the Magic are comes down to how those young players especially answer those questions. We'll get to how the coaches and the front office play a role in paving the next step. Now, confident you should be in their decision-making as the next phase of the Orlando Magic Confidence Meter. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. They're America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you today. Now through September 22nd, that is Sunday, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel any time. FanDuel's already got great odds up on the Orlando Magic. If you're looking to bet the over-under, they're over-under 47.5 wins. Essentially, we're talking confidence meter today. Do you think the Magic will have a better record than they did last year? If you do, take that over. If you don't, well, you're probably listening to the wrong podcast anyway. They also have odds for them to win the Eastern Conference. I believe they're at plus 1,700 on that. They have odds for them to win the Southeast Division, minus 140, the betting favorites. And of course, they have the opening night game only 4 weeks away now. We're getting closer to their game against the Miami Heat. Heat favored by 1 at home at the Kaseya Center on opening night. Should be a rip-roaring good time. Hop on the Bright Line, get down there. And you can't do it in Florida, but put a bet on FanDuel on that game. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. We want to thank you for making Locked On Magic your first listen of the day. For your next listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There is no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBA. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So obviously the next element, like the Magic have their roster. Full 15-man roster is set. We only have two-way spots. I'd love to tell you that I care about two-way spots and all that, but frankly, they're not that impactful at the end of the day. Like the NBA doesn't have a true minor league system, so it's hard for me to we'll talk about the two-way guys when they come in, but it's hard for me to put too much emphasis on them, especially when we're talking about kind of bigger picture stuff as we are today. But the roster is set. This is who the Magic are going to be, and whether they make changes or not is going to be up to the front office. Jeff Weltman has done a really good job restoring confidence in this team. There have been a lot of questions about Jeff Weltman over the years, some of the decisions, some of the things he's done, some of the things he hasn't done, but no one can debate that where we are in this process, where we are in this rebuild process, this is what a successful rebuild looks like. The Magic are young. They still clearly are going to get better. They took advantage of the #1 pick in the draft. They made a really difficult decision, appeared to have made the right decision with their #1 pick. They struck gold on a deep lottery pick. Their other lottery pick that year really worked out well. Their trade to break things down turned out to be a major win, which is so vital in any successful rebuild. Is the teardown trade has to be a huge success. It wasn't in the Dwight Howard trade. Love you, Vooch, but it wasn't. It was in the Vooch trade and the Nikola Vucevic trade. Magic ran circles around the Bulls on that trade. Obviously, this is now the next step. And it goes for both Jamal Mosley and Jeff Weltman. Rebuilding it's not easy, but the challenges are lower stakes. Like, the Magic lost the Aaron Gordon trade. Maybe they were always going to lose the Aaron Gordon trade. I know they still got that draft pick coming from Denver, but RJ Hampton was a flyer. It didn't work out. The Magic essentially, when they traded Aaron Gordon, said, we'll take Gary Harris, a nice veteran, for contract matching purposes. And Gary Harris has worked out well. Gary Harris has worked out well, all things considered. Argue about the playoffs another day, but Gary Harris has been a solid pickup for the Magic. They essentially got Gary Harris and 2 first-round picks because RJ Hampton was a rookie. They were willing to try him out. They were willing to let him make mistakes. They were willing to see what they had. And they've got that pick coming next year from Denver as well. So it wasn't a great deal. Denver obviously won a title because of Aaron Gordon, and he's so important to what they do. No one is, I've seen people blame Jeff Weltman for that deal and say that was a bad deal. And it's just like, well, that's all you could do. Aaron Gordon had already telegraphed he wanted out. Like, that's about what you're going to get in a teardown trade. The only way you succeed in a teardown trade is you trade early before people figure out the market is there for him and drive down that price. They stole from Chicago because they were just happy to get Nikola Vucevic. Teardown trades, rebuild trades, you're taking risks. You're trying different things. You're not giving up future assets. You're just collecting things and seeing if they work. And Jeff Weltman was very good at that phase. Like, we're here. We're talking about the playoffs. He was very, very good at that phase. And if there's criticism for what the Magic did this offseason, is the Magic didn't act like buyers. They didn't act like they're the big stack at the table. And again, they really weren't. Like, Paul George was out there. Everyone knew he was going to Philadelphia. Philadelphia had all that cap room. They have an MVP candidate in Joel Embiid. They were the big stack at the table. But the Magic, for all we know, weren't active in trade discussions or any of the trades that might have percolated over the summer. And again, you really look at it, only DeJounte Murray got dealt, was only the real major trade that happened this summer. It was a fairly quiet offseason as far as trades. Alex Caruso got dealt. That was big, but he's not an all-star. There are some major free agents like Isaiah Hartenstein, Klay Thompson, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and Paul George, of course, and DeMar DeRozan, who moved teams, but it was a fairly calm offseason on the NBA soap opera. The Magic weren't instigating things because Jeff Weltman, and I agree with this, Jeff Weltman, I think, still views this team as a rebuilding team, as a team that needs the space to grow and learn, a team that needs the space to make mistakes. They're ready for the pressure that comes with winning, but they still need the chance to skin their knee a little bit. And I think that when you make those kind of all-in trades, or when you expend future capital to bring in a big player like a DeJounte Murray, who cost two first-round picks, a young prospect on his rookie deal, and a rotation player in Larry Nance Jr., among other things, that's a lot for the Magic to give up. Even with the cap room they had, that would have been a lot and would have dented what they've built. And Jeff Weltman, who's very big into continuity, for better and for worse, wasn't ready to tinker with that foundation quite yet. The next phase, though, he's going to have to. If the Magic find themselves struggling with playmaking and they need a point guard, he's going to have to be willing to sacrifice something to get that done. He's going to be willing not only to sacrifice players, but future assets to do it. And if waiting for the right one to come around is the path, the right one wasn't there this summer. But it's not just Jeff Weltman that's entering a new phase. It's Jamal Mosley too. I have sat here and talked about how Jamal Mosley has always coached the team that the Magic were going to be, rather than the team that they are. His message, his lessons, his philosophy, the way the Magic played was saying, this is what we're going to do when we're successful. And he got complete buy-in for everyone to believe in that future. That future is here now. And Jamal Mosley's been great. Deserved to be the runner-up for Coach of the Year. Deserved Coach of the Year last year. Mark Daniel deserved it too. A lot of great coaches in this league. The league's never had better coaches, to be perfectly honest. There are more competent coaches in the league than ever before. But you still see some of those same criticism about Jamal Mosley. He sticks with players too long. The 10-man rotation. Should never have had a 10-man rotation in the playoffs. We all sat here. We all knew one of Paolo or Franz needs to be on the floor at all times. We had maybe a minute and a half, 2-minute stretch where that wasn't the case early in that series. It cost them. I think I get why he started Jonathan Isaac at center in games 1 and 2. I don't think they're telling us how hurt Wendell Carter was in that series, but that was a costly mistake. I do believe Jamal Mosley cost the Magic a game and a half in that series. And in a 7-game series, that mattered. Having said that, Jamal Mosley's done a very good job pitching the vision of this team. And now it's less about what this team's going to be in the future and a lot more about what this team is now. It's going to be a mix of both, like I said. This is still a developing team. This is still a growing team. This is still a very, very young team that needs the ability to make mistakes and needs a coach that's going to allow certainly key players, maybe not every player, but certainly key players to make mistakes. It's about winning, but it's not all about winning quite yet. But this is the transition the Magic are going through. And obviously right now the Magic are confident that they have the resources and ability to make moves when the time comes. When Jeff Wellman needs to make that big trade, I look at what the Magic did this summer, and I think they set themselves up to make that big move. I am really excited about what comes next and the opportunities ahead for the Orlando Magic. If they continue on their progression, if they continue to get better the way we think they're going to get better, especially the key players, the core players, sorry for everybody, but that's the reality. I do believe the Magic are better positioned to make the big move and to make the move that gets them over the top or gets them over that next hill. They have the resources to do it. For Jamal Mosley, I believe he can do it too. I believe he is much better tactically than he has been given credit for. But again, like all of his players, he's got to prove he can do it again. And obviously there is pressure now. If the Magic don't make the playoffs or have to go in through the play-in, which very possible. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it's not. Mosley's going to have to shoulder some of that blame. And he's going to have to find a way to get a team out of a funk and make sure that they don't have that dip in January that they had last year, because now we're playing a different game. Quite frankly, that's the great mystery of the season for everybody, because the Magic are playing a different game. And more than anything else, the question on everyone's mind about the Magic: are they closer to a title today than they were in May? Will they be closer to a title in June than they are now? That's the ultimate question and the ultimate answer. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by Gametime. Look, I love going to live events. I keep live event calendar open and know what's coming to Orlando, whether it's Weezer on Friday, whether it's Orlando City tonight against Charlotte FC, the MLS playoffs, of course, on the horizon for the Lions, whether it's the NWSL leading Orlando Pride. They are in the NWSL playoffs for the second time in franchise history. No matter the event, I know Gametime has my ticket, whether I decide to go months in advance or at the last minute. Gametime even has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I try to go to a lot of events, whether, again, at the Dr. Phillips Performing Arts Center, at the Kia Center, at Camping World, at Inter & Co Stadium, at the Bounce House, wherever it is. I know that Gametime has me covered. I looked up tickets for a concert that was at the Performing Arts Center. They had seats available even an hour before the show started, as I was debating whether to go or not. Eventually, I decided not to go, but I knew Gametime had my ticket to the show. And Gametime has so many great features, including their all-in pricing feature. Toggling this feature shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Gametime Picks, again, makes curation easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And their seat views give you a virtual panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. So, you may recall, and I had to look up the year that this was done. You may recall back in 2016, the Orlando Sentinel did a project called Orlando 2030. And they went around to different leaders in the community and different organizations in the community to ask, what is Orlando going to be like in 2030? And of course, being the Orlando institution that they are, they went to Alex Martins, the Orlando Magic CEO, and asked him what the Orlando Magic are going to be in 2030. And Martins infamously, not correctly, infamously said that he believed the Magic would win a championship by 2030. Now, in 2016, the Magic were at their lowest point. They had this crazy offseason that turned out to be a disaster, the kind of offseason that keeps you in a rebuild for another 5 years. And to say something like we will win a title at all, let alone in the next 14 years, which is a lifetime in the NBA, it seemed pretty big. At the same time, of course, what else was Alex Martin supposed to say? Like, he's supposed to tell the fan base, like, oh, no, we have no chance to win a title in 14 years? Like, whatever. Now, 8 years into those 14 years, the Magic have a young all-star, 21-year-old all-star. They have a 22-year-old World Cup champion on the verge of being an all-star. They have one of the best young coaches in the league. They were a 5 seed that took their series to Game 7 with one of the youngest rosters in the league. The Magic have a very bright future. And now with 6 seasons until the 2030 NBA Finals, the Orlando Magic feel like that championship window should be open for this Orlando Magic team by the time you get to 2030. And yes, let me reiterate this for people because I've seen it talked about already, saying, oh, the Magic have a star in Paolo. Why did they do what he said and do all this? The Magic have Paolo Banchero for the next 7 years. They got 2 more years under this contract, 5 more in his extension. He's signing that max extension next summer. The Magic have 6 more years with Franz Wagner, 7 more years with Paolo Banchero. If the Magic can't figure out how to be a title contender in the next 7 years, they don't deserve a title. Let's make that 100% clear. And that's where we sit, though. I want to make that juxtaposition very, very clear. 2016 was the lowest of lows, and the thought of winning a title by 2030 seemed impossible. It seemed so far-fetched because, frankly, 2016, Paolo Banchero was in middle school, I think. Trust me, I asked Paolo if he played with Markelle in Seattle, and he's like, no, like, I was in middle school when Markelle was in college. I was like, oh, man, I am old. It seemed ridiculous to think because it was so far away. But here we are at the beginning of what we expect to be a long playoff run. Everything I talked about in that first segment could go wrong for the Orlando Magic, to be perfectly honest. And the Magic are still a playoff team. Like, the floor for this Orlando Magic team is playoffs. 7 seed, play-in tournament, 8 seed, whatever. That's the worst, barring catastrophic injury. That's the worst case scenario for the Orlando Magic. This is a playoff team. And even with whatever talent comes in, this is a playoff team for the duration of Paolo Banchero's stay in Orlando. For the next 7 years, bet on the Magic making the playoffs. Go to FanDuel and bet on that if you can. I don't think they offer it, but bet on it. This is a playoff team for the far foreseeable future. And that's not something we've been able to say since Dwight left in 2012. That's the truth. And now the question is, how does this team get closer to a title? How confident are you that this team can win that title before 2030? Well, I've said this a million times. There's nothing more fun, nothing more optimistic, nothing more hopeful, nothing more exciting, nothing more fun, I said that twice, than a team figuring out how to win for the first time. We are still buzzing off that high of going through this process for the first time with this team, of the joy that comes from understanding, oh, this is fun when we win. It's been a while. Like, love the 2019 team to death. We felt that feeling during their run after the All-Star break. But it wasn't like that the whole season. This past season, it felt that way the whole year. The whole year was just vibes, and it was just the vibes were good. We're still feeling that. We're still hoping that that carries over and that this is a trajectory going all the way up without a stop. I don't mean to put water on the fire here, but it's going to be a challenge to get to the next step, to get to the next phase. There are going to be road bumps in the process. Look at the Boston Celtics. They had so many road bumps before they won their title, before they finally found the right combination with their two key players. And it took a lot of people continuing to have faith in that process because Boston made a lot of mistakes throughout. Trading Isaiah Thomas, probably the right decision. The Kyrie Irving saga, letting him walk for nothing, going through Kemba Walker, the injury to Gordon Hayward. It took them a long time to get everything just right. The Denver Nuggets went through heartache in the playoffs before they got to the top of the mountain. The Golden State Warriors, were crying out loud, under Mark Jackson, lost to the Denver Nuggets. Did they beat the Denver Nuggets? They lost a few times in the playoffs before they finally broke through to the finals. It is hard to break through. And the Magic, it's going to be hard for them to get into that title contender tier, to be considered true title contenders, because as excited as we all are for this season, nobody has the Magic as title contenders this year. They've got to prove they're ready to step up to another level. And it's going to take so many things to get there. It all, of course, starts with Paolo, Banchero, and Franz Wagner. It starts with your best players getting better. And at the end of the day, frankly, nothing else matters. All the development questions, every question, it only matters that Paolo and Franz are really good, are all NBA type players. That's going to make the team better. And obviously the team better will help them get there as well. And it's circular, it's an Ouroboros. But the Magic are indeed closer to a title than they've ever been. Than they've been since 2009, since 10, since 2010. Paolo isn't quite Dwight Howard yet. He's gotten a lot farther than Dwight did at this point in his career, but he's not quite Dwight Howard yet. And frankly, as we begin to think about this season to me feels like a season that's going to be a roadblock. We're going to hit that first bit of adversity. We're going to exit the season feeling a tinge of disappointment. The vibes are going to be brought down a little bit. And that's not a bad thing. I want to make that clear. That doesn't mean, like I've said this a million times, and I'll say it again before we start the season. I'll say it a million times before we start the season. I'll say it early in the season. I'll say it middle of the season. We'll see how the season goes first. But success is getting further in the playoffs. Failure is not necessarily that, if that makes sense. I will not judge this season a failure unless they miss the playoffs completely or something else goes terribly wrong. The season is about continuing to learn, continuing to get better, because at the end of the day, as much as we want to say we're so excited for 2025, and there's a lot of confidence about what this team's going to do in 2025. There are a lot of questions, but a lot of confidence that this team's going to overcome them or at least match what they did last year. Again, the floor is the playoffs. They're not missing the playoffs this year, barring catastrophic injury. But this season to me is still about learning and growing. And there are going to be mistakes, and there's going to be heartache, and you're going to hate me for saying this. The season's still not about this season, because the Magic are trying to win a title before 2030. The Magic are still playing for the team that they're going to be in 2026 and 2027 and 2028 and 2029, because that's when their title window opens. When Paolo is a little more seasoned, when Franz is a little bit more seasoned, when Jalen Suggs is a little bit more seasoned, when the Magic do make that big move to push their chips in, that's when the window opens. The window is a little ajar. We could feel the air coming through. And it's a good feeling. Trust me, we live in Florida. If we can get a little breeze, we're going to love it. It's a good feeling. But I want to make this really clear. Be confident with this team. Believe in this team. This team's proven us wrong so many times. I'm happy to be proven wrong again. But remember, this is still a long journey ahead. And there's a lot of work for this Magic team still to do. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. Of course, find me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. Subscribe to the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all the fun podcasts to your podcast-enabled listening device. Of course, download us and watch us as well on YouTube. Just search for Locked On Magic. Subscribe to us there as well. For the latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Of course, follow us on Twitter there at OMagicDaily. And for even more Orlando Magic content, be sure to check out my Patreon page, the Orlando Magic Hub, at patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub. And as always, thank you for your support. Now that you're done listening to me, be sure to check out the Locked On NBA podcast, where the local experts keep you updated daily on all the biggest storylines ahead of the season. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's going to do it for me today. I am still planning tomorrow's episode, so I don't want to tease or promise anything. We'll get back to player outlooks later on in the week. But until next time, for Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.